If the committee would recall, when I spoke about the gates that need negotiation, those red stars in between the different aspects of process flow. After an entity which is registered in terms of the Act has had its marketing drive or business development, they come back to apply for a contracting permit. It's an authorization that actually says such country is pleased or wants to buy 5 of this, 6.5 of that, and then there is quantification of that. So when the committee authorizes, it actually authorizes the true extent of the contract. However, the export might be a part shipment in any given year, which therefore means the export itself flowing from that contract would invariably be different because it represents a portion or a subset of the whole authorization. For instance, the IT systems that I run, Chair and your members, would then record that contracting permit having a finite value in terms of rents as well as quantities, which therefore means whoever therefore wishes to export may not or will not be able to export more than that authorization that was once given by the NCACC. It could be a year ago, it could be 5 years ago. Hence, processes allow that the applicant also amends and says to the NCACC, at a given time, you authorized me to enter into a contract for the number of items with such a finite value. I've negotiated further. It would seem like they need more of that, and they therefore request an amendment, which would then be authorized by the NCACC, such that I, on the systems, can then go and say, that original order that perhaps was, I'm giving example 3, is now actually being amended to 9 because the client was actually excited about what they received and they are actually saying they are looking for more. So it is true that you would find a variance between your contracting permit authorization per year as compared to your import and exports, because imports and exports are actually the real exports and imports, but contracting is the extent of the contracting value. I don't know if I've made myself clear.
Yes, you are making yourself clear.
Yeah.
In other words, drawing a difference between contracting the various stages of permitting.
Yeah, and then eventually the actual export.
And eventually the actual correct.
Yeah.
Where you now you realize what was right at the beginning.
Yeah. But I think, Chairperson, what I wanted to ask and suggest is that at a stage, it will be good to see the actuals versus those approved, to see, what is the industry actually doing and achieving versus the approval of permits and contracts.
Yes, I've been waiting for you to comment on this one, Mr. Jelly, because he says we can see the permits, but we never get to see the actuals, what was actually delivered from the permit, from the contracts.
Okay, through you, Chair, I do not wish to jump the gun, but we are currently in a system development for our IT, which should be able to start tracking that. However, it will still indicate that, an example, an authorization was given by the NCACC for 20 items in, for instance, this current year. It will then say, of the 20, only 16 were issued or exported in that year, and 4 are remaining. Any adjustments that would subsequently occur would then be also incorporated in both the quantity on the system and also future exports in line with what the NCACC may have authorized subsequently, because the applicant would have also asked for adjustments. So it is probably going to be how the system would be able to try and bring forth perhaps more realistic, if one can call them that, exports in relation to what would have been authorized in a given year.
Exactly. I expect that information to overlap on the quotas. And for example, you'll come to us and say, in this quarter, these are the permits we have granted, but we have no control when they deliver. They finally deliver on the contracts. And so, in other words, let's say in this quarter, they may still be delivering what was contracted in the previous year or the previous 2 years, but only to find that the actual delivery is happening this year.
Yeah.
So I'm saying there's going to be a time lag. Eh? No.
Time lapse.
Time lapse. Yes. You see, it's in other words, it will be difficult to synchronize the permits and the actual delivery, but you can still report on what actually happened as a result of previous contracts and permits granted. I'm not too sure if I'm making myself
correct. No, you're quite correct. Quite correct.
Yes.
Quite
correct. Is it possible for a system to give us that information?
Well, and I'm not looking at excuses, Chair, and your members. We have a somewhat oldish system, given what is currently at play or outside, but we have a system that is under development. Hopefully, it shall be flighted or be launched early next year. That will give us better statistics and coverage, and I think it allows for I think sufficient data manipulation in order to then give the statistics as per what, for instance, in this case, the committee desires, or any other stakeholder who would actually be saying, kindly give me this and that and that. We'll be able to actually go into the system and be able to do that. So I hope I'll still be around next year in January, thereabout, that should the next year's quarters be presented, we can perhaps have a market difference to how you've experienced these statistics on coming from this old system as compared to the new system. But I take your point. I've noted it.
Okay, that's fine. You may then move to the other questions.
Okay. The questions related to Appendix A, B, C, D, and all that. I shall perhaps start with where I've understood, unless I have misunderstood, but the question says in Appendix B, we are showing exports authorized. And from what I understood Ms. Mare saying is that we are actually saying a final exporter. In this case, for instance, it is United Arab Emirates. And in some instances, we say for warships, Republic of Uganda. And in some instances, we say ammunition, and then we show the Islamic Republic of Pakistan or the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Essentially, what this signifies is these are the things that, in terms of the UN categories, we actually have exported. I think perhaps we'll need to look back into the system in that column B correctly ought to read final importer because it is South Africa that is exporting. I think that's perhaps where the confusion actually arises.
Yes, for sure.
And the reverse would be true for imports because South Africa would be the final importer if you look at Appendix C. But I shall look into that because I know that sometimes the metadata in the system tends to get corrupted and then it produces this. I think it was a spot-on observation by Mr. Murray. I will look into that in order to clarify and remove the confusion that actually ought to be appearing in these reports as presented.
Can I, Mr. Jelly, can I just mention why I raised that question? Because of the end user certificate and the UN requirements. If anybody is buying it from us and they are exporting it to whoever, in terms of the end user certificate, we must know where they are exporting it. So in other words, if they export the armored patrol vehicles, wherever UAE is exporting it, then we must know it. But I suspect that you are right. That column should say final importer, not final exporter.
Yes.
I assume that.
Yes.
Yes, all right.
Correct. And the other question was raised by Mr. Mar regarding Mozambique.
And Turkey.
Right.
Okay. For Mozambique, I will respond as follows. When there was a question asked during the Q1 presentation, I remember distinctly it was the 25th of June.
Yeah.
And the question was, did we export or authorize anything through to Mozambique? And the chairperson responded and said, we are actually assisting Mozambique in terms of what their requirements are.
Correct.
The process is as follows, members of the committee, through you, Chair. Until the entity, which is South African, has got its paperwork correct, no export would actually eventuate, which could also explain the delay. Possibly in Q3, the committee would observe that there would have been exports to Mozambique because I still remember distinctly there were issues with paperwork by the entity from whom or from which Mozambique wished to purchase. Therefore, the arms control framework, regardless of how severe the need is in the other country, still requires full compliance with the law. Otherwise, if we did things either cutting corners and all that, would actually be found to be having not as an effective arms control framework. But we could check maybe in Q3 indications where it would then be clear that yes, a discussion and the in-principle agreement of supply to Mozambique could have been discussed during either Q1 or Q2, but the actual authorization, including export, could have happened or may have happened in Q3 because the paperwork needed to be in place and in compliance fully with the law.
You mean
otherwise?
You mean Q3 of last year?
No, this year.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yes.
so we're talking about something that is yet to happen. For now, it's still paperwork.
No, what we are saying in answering Mr. Murray's question, he remembers distinctly when the chair, Minister Mthembu, said, we are actually assisting Mozambique in terms of what they need. But that being the case, whoever it is that Mozambique is buying from for what they require would still need to be in full compliance with the Act. And therefore, if the paperwork is not correct, there then is a lag in time where you'd probably expect, for instance, in Q2 rather, to see this export being reflected, whereas it is possible that it will be in Q3, in that the paperwork could only be resolved in Q2. I
All
don't know
right.
if I'm making sense.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. We are making sense.
Yeah. Okay. And Turkey?
Okay, the Turkish exports, if I remember, I could be wrong, was round about, I think,
April.
April.
Yeah, April, May.
The uplift that took place was on permits that were issued before the state of disaster was declared. And what actually happens in terms of the statistics, or what we did, was just to reissue the permits, because the permits have got a validity date, and when that lapses, an export can actually not take place. So what we did was just to reissue permits which were already accounted for in previous quarters statistics. We're just reissuing those permits to enable the products to leave the country, but they were actually accounted for in earlier periods. I can, however, go and check and ascertain the committee through my responses to actually say this is what has transpired. I am keen to actually do that in order to.
I will
to
appreciate that, because that'll be good. I just want to make a comment.
Yes.
Sir. It is strange that if it means that once a permit has been approved, whether it lapses or not, it always stays in place. I find that difficult. I mean, there might be totally different circumstances, and for a permit to lapse and then a reapplication, it should be reported every time that permits are issued, even if you report that so many lapsed. But I mean, it might, so in other words, hypothetically, it might be 10 years ago that a permit has been issued or a contract has been approved, and in 10 years' time, you will say, okay, we just reissue the same one. We don't have to report on that, while the circumstances might be totally different.
Maybe let me ask a question. Is there an obligation to report on reissues, on reissued permits?
Actually, there is none, Chair, through you. And
but is there a pediment? Is there anything that stops you from giving us that information? That of this information we're giving you, but these are reissues.
We could look into that. I would perhaps like to cite an instance where, and this is not a complaint from how we do our own operations, but very often the applicants tend to almost anticipate the system where they would then apply when they're actually not in a position to can actually ship. In other words, they cannot actually export. And they then actually come back to us and request us for an issuance where the one that is lapsed needs to be canceled on the system in order to be reissued. Otherwise, the system would not reissue the same permit over and over and over unless the others are actually canceled. And very often, even the very statistics that we give you, for instance, now in Q2 in this case, would actually be reflected on the system where that reversal actually is done. But as I say, I will go into the system and check in order to then say, are there any impediments that can actually show how many times a certain permit was canceled? Because I've said to industry when engaging them, when we actually have had to issue permits and they actually cancel them, for them, it represents convenience that they can do the cancellation and the reissuing. But for us, from the perspective of the administrator, we are actually running on the same spot, trying to service them in order for them to be able to export. So I've requested them to try and time the export periods, including shipments and all that, in order to minimize the eventuality of permits either being issued, that lapse that would then subsequently require reissuing. But I will go into the system.
And there are no penalties involved.
Not as yet, Chair, but we are working on not penalties rather, but a manner that actually dissuades such type of conduct.
All right. Okay. All right. And so you've dealt with Mozambique and Turkey, and there was an issue on Appendix C, United Kingdom, the 2 helicopters at a value of 530,000. Sorry. Yeah, 530,000 rand. It's Appendix C. I'm sure there is a problem in the representation of figure there. I don't know.
I'm trying to follow that. Appendix C, is it imports? Yes, it is imports.
Yeah, it's imports, yeah. Attack helicopters. And
yes.
Quantity 2, the rand value 530,000. I'm sure I can afford this.
Yes, that is cheap stuff.
Maybe is it a complete value, or it's parts you're talking about? What is it? I think that was the question remain.
It is I think complete helicopters, because it is actually complete systems.
Okay.
Yeah. But I can follow that up. However, I wish to raise something to the committee, that there are instances where previously militarized platforms have actually been demilitarized and actually being brought into the country. And part of what we do is to work with the CAA to do the certification of the extent of demilitarization, such that the hot points are removed and anything that would actually prove offensive. Because the importer would then be using that, for instance, to deal with fighting field fires, geospatial observations, and all of that. But I can follow up the value per se, but the likelihood is it could be those demilitarized platforms that would have been imported. But I can.
You can see, Jayla, you have encrypted the information too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need a bit more information, and so that we don't have to ask these questions, because it will be in black and white. Now we have to ask information that is behind the information that is before us. Now you know exactly what type of information we're looking for. Okay. So yeah, so we can then move. You'll come back to us on this one, because you are saying it may be, you are not telling us exactly what happened, the actual position with respect to this case.
I undertake to do that, Chair, through you, but it is correct that perhaps if it's 2 helicopters, they are very cheap.
Yeah, they're very cheap. I can afford them. All right. We can then move to, all right. I think we have dealt with all the questions. I thought I allow the space so because they clarify questions that are yet to be asked. Yeah. And I think let me now allow more space for questions.
There were just 2 outstanding. That was the rounds from Republic of Bulgaria. What is round? Is that specific ammunition? And then also the last one was on the last page, aerospace and propulsion, whether there was any propulsion exported to the UAE, and whether that was under systems. That was the last.
Okay, the rounds are a specific type of round, and essentially, yes, those were for Bulgarian.
Yeah, but is that bullets?
Yes, but not like your normal slug that you bought for your sidearms. It is what, for instance, PMP produces, which ranges from slightly 75 to high, we'll say 140, 145 millimeters.
Okay.
And then the issue, Chair, of the propulsion is essentially what I've indicated to the committee. Most of the things that are actually exported belong to what is called the munitions list. However, dual use items have a slightly different both nature and character, in that they are more technical and sometimes not very big items. However, they are sub-items of a bigger system, and because of the categorization which flows directly from the Wassenaar arrangement, that is how then the categorization is represented here. We probably would not have sent any big propulsion system. It could be components that are part of the propulsion system that would have gone through to the UAE in this case.
Because
But I
that's
can
60
also
million.
check and certify that as well.
Yeah, that's
All right.
60 million. So that's something. So thank you very much, Chair.
All right, thank you so much. Colleague?
Chair, you muted. I don't know who's trying to speak.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Murray. Are you all covered, colleagues? I'm looking on the participants list to check if there are any hands raised. It doesn't appear there are any. Are you all covered, colleagues? Mafanya, are you covered?
We covered.
I'm covered, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Chair.
Yes, who's this? Let me just look at who this is. Who's this? Tabo. Yes, sir, you are on the platform.
Yeah, Mare has represented us very well today.
Yeah, no, it did so well. And look, but do you have any?
Except I'm not sure whether because due to connection I might have missed something. Maybe let me just raise the question. You'll indicate whether it was covered or not.
Okay. All right.
With regard to it's a follow-up from the last meeting. A matter was raised as a deadlock between RDM as well as NCACC. Can we get an update whether issues that resulted in them deadlocking are resolved at this stage, or what is the status with regard to that? Because it affects the functioning of AMSCO. As we all know that the financial constraints of the DoD and how they impact AMSCO and ultimately the industry.
What was it in connection with? Was it not in connection with the end user certificate? If it was in connection with the end user certificates, that issue has been addressed and gazetted. I think Jelly reported on it right at the beginning. Was it in connection with that? Mr. Motle, I can't do. Mara, you want to assist?
Yeah, I think it was with regard to the end user certificate and their frustrations of the slow time for that to be resolved, because that was an impediment for them to export.
Yes, I remember that it was holding up 50 billion rand worth of export.
Exactly.
And so I guess when that was removed, then it cleared the way.
Probably.
Yeah.
But it will anyway be good to just get the confirmation.
From the industry itself. We'll be meeting with the industry in the next week or so.
Yeah. But I'm sure the
NCACC,
but I'm sure the NCACC chairperson, who is dealing with specifically the end user certificate, will know whether that has been resolved.
No, Mr. Marais, it's a public information. It was gazetted.
Yeah, I know.
We all need to read the gazette just to check for ourselves if it satisfies the concern that was raised. And I think they attempted to accommodate the industry. Mr. Make, your hand is up. And Make, is your hand still up?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to find out, usually, how is this question of the end user certificate, how do you enforce it? Because, I mean, surely you can go there and check how it is used and so on. I mean, how your weapons are used and so on. But is it possible to enforce it? I mean, I can say I bought your weapons and you come running into my country and I've already bought them. I just want to understand how that is enforced. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, Mr. Make, they've corrected exactly what you are talking about. They are now leaving it to bilateral agreements, as opposed to being imposed on our own police, by our own police.
Okay, so I understand.
Yeah, in other words, it's a country to country now discussing how that will happen. And you see, so they've removed it from, where it was, where it started to become a problem, because countries that were wanting to buy from us were saying, no man, if you still insist on this clause, that post-delivery inspection, we're not going to buy from you. And then the discussion was that, okay, it's fine, we hear you, but let's leave it to bilaterals, country to country. I'm sure Jelle would put it better than I do. Jelle, may you comment on this one?
Can I just add, Chairperson, obviously what was done is the portion of the end user certificate where it was a unilateral, where our inspectors could arrive there at their plant, it might be that there will be discussions on a DIRCO level, wherever there's a doubt of any kind, so that via that bilateral arrangement, the inspection will be done, so that it will not just be a violation of their integrity and independency or how they might have perceived it. But Mr. Jelle can probably just confirm whether I'm right or
yes, yes, you are right. That's how we understood it. That it's no longer a unilateral thing now. It's by mutual agreement. And Jelle, you may want to do it better than us in explaining the matter.
I think, Chair and your committee members, you covered it correctly, Chair, that there was an amendment of the end user certificate clause that actually indicated that end user assurance and certification of where the products are shall be done through diplomatic processes.
Yeah.
However, I wish to state the following, and it is something that through you, Chair, and I hope my minister doesn't fire me, that pains me, because end user certificate never intended for a unilateral action on any matter whatsoever. I have a lived experience. I may not quote the country, but I can say to the committee, we exchanged 7 note verbal between ourselves, being South Africa, and the country that wanted to come and do an inspection. And that covered the whole spectrum of dates, who would be entitled to come, where would they be in order to conduct those inspections. Internally, I, as head of secretariat, had to run and engage our defense units in order for them to be comfortable with how we are negotiating how best to manage this inspection. Because clearly, it was never a matter of disrupting or not observing any sovereignty. Because at any given rate, when these transfers occur, there is both a change of title and or ownership. So then, as well as now, end user certificate, assessments for effectiveness and all that shall always be handled through diplomatic processes.
Do they involve you when they discuss these matters, so that you also input in the discussion?
I am key and principal involved in all these things because I am essentially in the, I don't want to say in the belly of the beast, but it is essentially where these negotiations must take place. And they shall be done in accordance to each of the country's dictates. Because we, through the world system of governance, trust the bona fides of any other country just like they would trust us. And essentially, it is the weakest link that would occur where a certain country does not actually honor its obligations of the end user. Because then, how else do you proceed with transferring items to them when they don't actually respect end user undertakings?
Exactly. In other words, the country must, be scared of the consequences of not honoring their undertaking, and so we must not just, leave it, giving them a blank check. They must fear the consequences of not, honoring their side of the stick.
Yes, Chair.
All right. No, I'm happy with that. It sounds that even the end user certificate was used once in the last 30 years, not 30 years, 26 years. Again, it was used on transactions that happened before 1994 because there was a need arose that an inspection be conducted. But since then, it's never happened. And okay, it's fine. We rely on you guys to ensure that even that system, that arrangement is foolproof. We don't want anything to fall through the cracks, okay?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I think we are done. Thabo, are you sponsored this discussion? Are you happy with how we are ending it?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm I'm on track now, Chair.
Sharp. JJ, Mike, are you also contributed in the sponsoring of the discussion? Are you happy with how we are ending it? JJ? All right. I think the system might have kicked him out. All right, colleagues, I think we have exhausted our discussion. And all right, so Advocate Jelle, you otherwise we need you to decipher or rather to share more information, and when we meet next, and we don't want to assume anything. We as a committee also are interested in seeing how well is our industry is performing. But it is through this summary that can give us the picture. And even if maybe when you come back, you must also have your own analysis of the information. You present the cold facts. We don't see the analysis, presented graphically, how we are doing versus the previous quarter or year to year, and so on and so forth. Which countries we have strong relations with in terms of buying from us, and what is the reason for that country having interest in buying our stock? Is it because we are they're happy with our products, and so on and so forth? I don't know. I think we need now an economic analysis of the data.
Chairperson, can I just add to you? You remember that part of our program is interactions with the defense industry later on this year.
Yes.
So obviously this will assist us greatly, and it will empower us when we discuss with them, and then we can bring these, if there are concerns raised, maybe it's part of this, maybe it's not, but at least then we can be empowered to at least interact with them in terms of growing the industry as well, and see how we can assist.
No, we will do that. Mr. Jelle, is it possible to give us the economic analysis?
I will do that, Chair. Hopefully, I'm not too sure what your dates are when you actually meet industry, but I will provide perhaps slides that indicate changes and comparisons between various quarters. I mean, when I was compiling this PowerPoint presentation, actually could have done a comparison of year on year. Sometimes with the quarterly reports, the shifts are there, but perhaps do not give a proper indication. But this year would be a completely different set of picture or figure occasioned by COVID-19 as compared to last year. That also becomes another factor. But I will look into that and ensure that I can provide it. Okay,
please do. Now, colleagues, thank you very much, Jelle, for the presentation and the undertaking you're making today. Colleagues, thank you very much for the evening. And so we'll interact with you again in the next quarter. You see, our meeting with the industry, Pat, when is our meeting with the industry? Is in 2 weeks' time, eh?
Oh, next week, the 5th.
Oh, I see, next week the 5th. No, it's fine, Jelle. Don't stress. And we will meet with the industry. Maybe we may have to come back to you with more requests. And but that depends on our discussion with the industry, because the idea is to get more information from you to assist us to engage with the industry, as it were. I hope you'll be invited, because we have also asked a presentation on the BE Charter. It was launched, but we are not hearing anything from it. I don't know who is the custodian of the charter. Is it you? Is it AMSCO? Or is it DTI? Because it's not going to happen by its own. Somebody must enforce it, must keep the scores, and get guys who are not, playing by ball to do so. Who's responsible? Who's the custodian of the charter?
I can categorically state, Chair, and your members of the committee, that it is not the NCACC. However, the Department of Defense, in conjunction with industry, had collaborated in developing that charter.
Oh, I see.
I know that somewhere, somehow, the DTI, in terms of SAMDEC, which is an entity that is looking at defense exports as well, as a subset of exports of the country, also has a bearing on that. However, it is definitely not falling under the purview of the NCACC.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that information. We'll ask the DOD to give us more on it. And thank you very much, colleagues. The meeting has come to
Chairperson.
Yes,
Chairperson.
Malia Chelembe.
Yes, Chairperson, before you close, I want to second Honorable Mute that Honorable Murray represented us very, very well. He did very well. Thanks for representing us in that manner. Just to second that, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, thanks. It did. Now, colleagues, thank you very much for the evening, and until we meet again. Thanks, Secretariat. Thanks, our team.
Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.
Everybody,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Chief.
My pleasure.